the hit 'em mentality has become extremely popular, especially at the younger levels of play. I think people's perception of lacrosse is that it's this barbaric, free hitting sport, when really it's not. It's a skillful sport. It's an art, and it's really an enjoyment to watch when played correctly. A couple of things that I would do to try to decrease the hit 'em behaviors and mentality is just purely by education, is by educating and continuing to educating coaches around the country of how to play this game correctly. I think there's misconceptions of how to play this game, especially in some non-developed lacrosse areas, where you may typically have maybe a football coach or a parent coaching a lacrosse team that, for not his own fault, but just doesn't know the game that well, is having kids hit them and focusing on more of laying out a kid rather than working on proper footwork or technique. And so I think education is a big part of it, and I also think that there needs to be some sorts of sanctioning from governing bodies that holds people accountable for anything that is deliberate or serious, because the last thing we want is for our sport to continue to get a bad rep regarding high hits and violence. We want to make sure that our sport is on a national and international stage showcased the proper way, and I think by education and spreading the good word of the game, you can accomplish that. We know a lot more about concussions now than we used to, and especially when I used to play and when I first got into coaching. Concussions, we would know when somebody received them, but we never knew the serious, significant effects long term that a concussion may have on a particular person. And so, one of the things I would do in changing my coaching, and it's something that I've kind of done now, is teaching guys how to properly take checks. And I think that's a skill that has been lost and has never really been taught. I remember being a young hockey player, and once you hit bantam age, which was around 12 years old, 13 years old, you would take a hitting class. And the biggest part about the hitting class was not necessarily learning how to properly hit, but it was learning how to properly take a hit and protect yourself. And so I think as a next step is teaching our guys how to make sure that they're playing the game, but also putting their bodies in a safe spot, because this game can really be played without taking any risk or any chances of being injured. And it's just body control, it's body awareness, and it's something that we need to focus on. Looking back at my playing career and growing up playing hockey and lacrosse, I just grew up playing primarily box lacrosse. I never really played competitive field lacrosse until I came to the University of Denver and played college. But I know for a fact I had at least 5 concussions that I knew of, and probably had a few more that I didn't know of. But we never had a trainer. You get your bell rung, you'd maybe black out for a quick second, you would sit on the bench, and take a squirt some water on your face, and honestly, the next thing you know, you'd be back on the floor playing. I remember getting a bad one, and taking off the rest of the game. I think it happened late in the second period. I took the third period off. They knew I had a bad concussion. I did see a trainer. The only thing they made sure they did was wake me up in the middle of the night to make sure I was still there. And then I got up the next morning and played in another game. And so, again, I think that goes back to us not knowing the severity of what can happen when receiving many concussions. Would I have stopped playing? I think as an athlete, I think as a competitor, you never really stop playing until somebody doesn't let you. And I don't think if I would have stopped, I stopped playing because of it. Now, if I had a bad one when I was playing in the Major League Lacrosse with Denver Outlaws, and it kept me out for a few weeks, but I was anxious to get back and got cleared to come back. If it became more severe and I had multiple later on in my career, then you never know. You never want to risk harm to yourself and your future and to your family, for the sake of just playing a game. But as a competitor and as a person who has a ton of passion for this sport, it would have been very hard to step away. I'm lucky that I didn't have to step away due to concussions, but I know of many people in this sport that have had to step away, that have had more serious concussions, and it was really their only option unless they wanted to suffer even more long-term in their life. And I think as I got older, I was able to kind of self-diagnose myself that I did receive a concussion, but when I was younger, you just weren't too sure. There was times you would black out. There was times you would be, very dizzy. There's times where you couldn't remember things. But when you're younger and you're playing on a sports team, and during that time, during that kind of era, there was no trainer. There was always serious threats of concussion, but there wasn't this much awareness as there is now, and so no, you wouldn't necessarily know that you had one. You would just try to get back out and play as quickly as possible, and I think that was always the mentality, especially where I grew up, as far as getting back on the floor, getting back on the ice, or getting back on the field. When I received my last one, which was playing in Major League Lacrosse, I definitely knew that it was pretty bad and it was severe. I was a little bit older. I had a family now, and so there was a lot more at risk. And so, that one we took our time to get back into. I did end up coming back, and knock on wood, and luckily I didn't receive another one. But after receiving one, you're definitely a little bit more susceptible to receiving another, unless you are fully recovered. And I think that's an important part of it, is you need to be fully recovered. If you're not fully recovered, you can do even more damage to yourself. And so, having that type of awareness, and I think this whole concussion thing that has come from a bunch of different stuff is good. I think we need to be aware of it. You can handle broken bones. Broken bones heal. You don't want to ever be messing with your head or with your brain. And so, I wasn't sure early on if I did have one or didn't have one, except for the really severe ones. But definitely as I got older, I started to know my body and could diagnose myself when I did receive a concussion. Based on my experience as a player and as a coach, and having a bunch of concussions myself, and obviously having a team with a lot of guys that get concussions. It's when you play a physical sport, whether there's some sort of physicality involved, it's you're going to receive, people are going to receive concussions. My best advice that I could give players that are recovering from one is one, make sure you're fully recovered before you step back on the playing field. And then two is, I don't believe that necessarily rest is always the best way to recover. I think rest is important for a certain amount of time, but then I think, like anything, you need to train yourself, you need to train your brain, you need to work out your brain to get back up to that 100% of where you were. And so I've seen it firsthand where guys have just purely rested. They've got a concussion, they've done nothing, and all of a sudden it was over a period of time. Yeah, sure, some symptoms have gone away, but they jump right back into it, and they're not prepared for it. And most times than not is they have a reoccurrence and they have another concussion, and they're back on the sidelines. The ones that have done it right, where they rest for a certain amount of time and then gradually get back into physical activity and then into some sort of physical contact, taking their time, whatever that time frame may be, and it may be different for one person as it is for another person, but usually they have the best results. And so I think rest is important early on, but then also making sure that you're working yourself out and you're having